welcome back to the Kinetic Spine and Sport podcast. We're on episode 10, which is awesome.
Good job.
Thank you. Before we start, thank you to the Moondogs, Habaneros studio crew, production crew for letting us do this fun little project. And yeah, 10 episodes is kind of fun.
That's a big celebration.
Yeah.
You know, you remember when you turned 10 years old? It was like a big deal because you went to double digits.
Oh man, I was in, what would be the 5th grade, maybe
Probably
6th grade,
4th grade.
if I'm young for my grade. Yeah.
Back when you were a kid.
Good year.
Yeah. You don't look like you've aged. You've done pretty well in that.
I gotta update some pictures, that's
There
for
you
sure. I've gotten a couple comments recently, actually.
Keep the facial going.
Yeah. Thanks to my fiance and her friends who come through the clinic and heckle me sometimes and remind me that my business card was from when I graduated 8 years ago.
It might be time to update that picture.
Yeah. So
you know, it's not like you're in school anymore and you don't get the picture taken every year. So it's kind of like now you don't have the structure that's right there. You get to be the adult and make the structure.
Yeah. There's no sign up.
Well,
Nobody told me to sign up for a new
heck?
picture this year. So, yeah, that was last week. That's funny. Yeah, well, I'll half introduce you.
Introduce me. That's good.
This is Kris Langworthy. So I've made a number of comments about her in previous episodes. So
I hope they were somewhat good.
So people have somewhat of an idea about how we work together and collaborate and do some stuff. And that's kind of the goal, is just like talk about that today.
Yeah.
So before we get into what we've done together, let's just have you explain a little bit about what you do and kind of your direction and focus that we just got done talking about.
Fun part.
A little bit
ago. We literally just walked from your office over here. This is so cool.
We just finished our meeting, so there's a lot of fresh ideas.
Yeah. Mission, vision, values, all this stuff. So, Kris Langworthy, as you know, and for those of you watching, I am trained as a registered nurse, but back about 10 years ago, launched a leadership coaching business. Partly came out of our daughter had gone through cancer. I watched, as a nurse manager, I had watched conversations and communication patterns in leadership and staff kind of go awry sometimes, and just thought I saw where some basic understanding of personality types, understanding of goals and outcomes really could shift conversations and make culture better, make conversations better, relationships better. And I was like, you know what? I just did a really tough thing navigating cancer. I bet you, let's just figure this out. And truthfully, it just kind of started out of sharing our story and the power of having a vision statement and having that when Sarah was in treatment. And it's just kind of grown and emerged, and here we are, you know. We were just talking earlier about 80 to 90% of my clients are somewhere in the healthcare space, whether they're spas or, chiropractic or dental or eye doctors or somewhere in that healthcare space. Yeah,
and you work with kind of not just a range of healthcare people, but also like a range in size.
Oh, absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
To where I know some of your work is more of individual based, right?
Yeah.
Where you work with a person or the owner or a leader or manager.
Correct.
And then there's other parts where it's more team driven.
Correct.
Right. So can you explain like how do you decide like, yep, this is more of a one-on-one thing versus, okay, we're going to address the team?
That really depends on the person I'm talking to, what their pain point is, because, first and foremost, in healthcare, we always talk about if you make a diagnosis without an assessment, it's malpractice. Like seriously. Yep. So like really that decision gets made back at the assessment level when we're having a conversation, and it's kind of like, okay, so Dr. Luke, what are you aiming to solve? What are you aiming to go after? What if there's a pain point, because most of us don't move forward without a pain stimulus. We'd like to say we just move forward because we want to move forward.
Yeah, because it's just good.
It's just good. And some of us do that, but there comes that sticking point where usually it's the pain that kind of like pushes us up and over the edge. Yep. And so that conversation usually is that leader struggling with, I just don't know how to talk to my staff. I just don't know how to have those tough conversations. And then we'll have a whole dial back, and maybe we'll reverse and we'll pull that, kind of pull the arrow back a little bit. We'll talk with that leader. We'll help them understand themselves. Like, hey, this might be going on for you, whatever. And then we might start moving into the team, or we might start, you know what, I just want to work with you with my team. Just come in and do one team building activity. Mm-hmm. I'll get a taste and see if I really like you, want to work with you more. And then we go back and we work backwards. We start with the team and we work back to the owner. So it really depends on kind of what that person's presenting with. What's their, here's the medical term, what's the symptoms they're presenting with, you know? Yeah. Like, if this is like, we need to do teamwork right now, let's start with a culture assessment. One organization I'm working with right now, that's what we're starting with, is we're starting with the team, because there's enough conflict happening. We're doing a culture assessment, identifying what's going on underneath the surface for them, and saying, okay, based on that assessment, where do we want to go forward? Yeah. So that was a really clear-cut answer, right? Like, for sure. Yes, both and.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of gets into the perspective, or like the idea that, like, yes, you may have a process, but not every process runs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 100%. Sometimes you have to run the process 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. You know, run it the other way. Exactly. So to kind of be in a space where, yeah, you can assess and then figure out which direction does this have to go, because you probably end up covering a lot of the same bases.
Absolutely.
But it's just from a different point, a different direction, you know, with a different space for it.
Well, and we've been working on the Find Your Why with your team, right? Mm-hmm. And depending on what the why is of that particular team, we might find that the picture they want to create, this is the pain point that's because of what they value. Like, let's really dig down deep here first. Mm-hmm. Or the other person might say, you know what, this is a pain point, but this is really bothering me over here. Can we fix this first? And so we'll start there. Sure. And so it doesn't, you know, when I bake, guess what, guys? I'm throwing the eggs and the flour and everything. Probably don't tell anybody, but I might mix up the order a little bit.
Right.
You know.
Because you can, though.
You can. Yeah, and you can. And it's like, okay, if we get the ingredients right, you know, when I make a pastry, you want to add the flour at the last part, you know.
Sure. I wouldn't know, but sure.
Okay, well, just trust me on that one. We'll teach you that someday. You know, we haven't done that class yet. That was one of my team activations we did. One of my very first ones. So we had a home care team, and we actually brought them into a community kitchen, and we actually had them do a whole team building exercise of making tacos. And I gave them all the ingredients, all the groceries were laying on the counter. And then we did a whole debrief their profiles afterwards. And it was so fun because they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that was the supporter. Or yeah, that was the chatty Kathy in the kitchen who didn't get anything done. And it's kind of fun to... So we might have to do that sometime. We might have to go have a cooking episode.
I love tacos.
There you go. So we can do that.
And our meetings are usually on
lunch break.
Tuesday.
Oh, there you go. So we could do a Taco Tuesday. Yeah.
Well,
you heard it here first, guys. This is what we're going to do.
We're going to have a lunch episode. That's what I heard. But it's cool because that's a good example of, like, patterns are going to play their way out almost regardless of environment, regardless of what they're doing, 100%. Right? So, 100%. Like, the things that you see while the team is making tacos are the same things that you'll see while the team is going through their day-to-day activities.
100%.
And sometimes it has to be just like an environmental change to almost disconnect or distract people from that. Mm-hmm. And then you can just say, like, hey, like, you just did that while you were putting lettuce on those things. And, like, that's kind of the same way that you do that when you're doing, like, paperwork over here. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, how we do one thing is how we tend to do most things, right? Yeah. You know, if we have somebody who's like, I'm a little conservative, I don't make decisions really fast, why do we expect we're going to be a business owner that's just like a boom, 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 and really risky?
Right.
You're not going to be. You know, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not.
Because it's not who you are.
It's not who you are. Yeah. If you're a Ferrari on the racetrack, you're going to be a Ferrari probably in the office too, you know? And so we may want to, you know. Yeah. Or if you get married, you know, this might be a conversation you guys might want to have.
Sure.
Yeah. I suspect you've had them.
We've had a few. Yep. We've had good conversations for sure. I don't know if I've convinced her that
she's going to watch this, so make sure you say appropriate here.
Correct. That is always one of my filters for sure.
I just protected her. And him.
Yeah. Us. Yes. All of it. I'm still trying to convince her to come onto the podcast for an episode.
Oh, it'd be fun.
And by convince her, I mean, like, highly encouraging, basically telling her, like, it's just gonna happen. Like
it's not a matter of if, it's when.
Like I want it to, and it just seems like it'd be fun and cool.
It makes sense.
Talk about her every
that's
other
your why.
episode. Yeah,
it makes
right.
sense. It makes sense.
And then she can say, "What's it like to experience this craziness on a everyday basis?"
Well, she can just come on this podcast and go, "Yep, this is exactly how he is."
Yeah,
but, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's funny. So then I guess from there, let's talk about where we started, because that kind of plays into like how you start with things, right? Kris,
where did we start, Dr. Luke? Where did we start?
Yeah. So I connected with Kris through BNI, our networking group, and when we started working together, part of it was I could use the school stuff as a way to do professional development.
Yep.
So some of it was just me trying to be opportunistic, where I could essentially get a free money stipend to hopefully be a better person, better coach, better
whatever. If you're a better coach, you're a better business owner too, right?
Exactly.
It kind of plays together.
Exactly. And so when that ended up getting connected, it was right around a time where I was going through staff changes.
Yep.
And which was last fall, end of summer-ish. Yeah. And I remember going through that, because you mentioned like it usually starts with a pain point.
Yeah.
And my pain point at the time was understanding that, like, to me, this business is a long-term thing.
Yeah.
I hope to take this clinic very far. We hope to do lots of cool things with it, but I can't do that by myself. And if I don't put effort and focus into a team and creating a team and building people, that like it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Alone.
It's not going to be fun.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where we started, because I all of a sudden, after working with the same office manager for 2 years, had new people.
Yeah.
And I had a couple new MSU students, and then Alex, who was also still part-time doing her master's.
Yeah.
And so my pain point was, oh my gosh, I have all these new people. We still have to run this complicated system.
Right.
How do I do that in a way where I don't scare people away?
Right.
And also create a good space for them to like be a part of it and get stuff out of it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where we started.
Yeah, it was. We started with that
and
just kind of talked through that. And as you recall, we started with some profile assessments, because it's back to how you do things.
Yep.
Is, there's amazing people out there that can take and craft questions that help draw out of us what's in us that seem like totally ridiculous questions. Like, rate these 4 things in order of what you'd want to do.
Yeah.
What the heck does this have to do with anything? And you get the papers back and you get the reports back and you're like, oh my gosh, that's uncanny. Like I've had people, when we do these reports, like, were you in my office? Did you take the file out of my brain? Is that the,
Planted a microphone.
Planted a microphone in your brain, yeah. But that's what's fun, is those people that are so good at that can put that information into a package that you and I can sit down.
Yeah.
And for the most part, you and I are pretty consistent people, and we can look back and say, oh, this is how this person's going to tend to show up. You never base a hiring decision based on an assessment, but you use it as a tool to say, helps to get you to know that person faster. Like when Alex came on, hey, these are some things you're going to want to know. This is what's important to her. If you want to be the best manager, leader, supervisor that you can be, these are things that feel like honey to her heart.
Right.
And they may not feel like honey to your heart.
Sure. For sure.
And so, is she somebody that wants to move fast, or is she somebody that wants the details? Part of what we talked about today was liking those task lists. Show me what I need to do. That's kind of fun. For you to know that and go, oh, okay, I know what she wants, and I can, to the best of my ability, like, be intentional as a leader, owner, manager, to say, okay, this is what she needs to do her job well. How do I provide that? And so I think it helps you, hit the ground faster.
For sure.
Is definitely, we can accelerate that path. And that's what I love about profile assessments is, you can spend the next 6 to 9 months kind of going, I think the pattern is she really likes this.
Right.
I think the pattern is.
But on Tuesday she didn't, so now I'm confused.
I'm confused, yeah. Versus we can take that and within an hour I can give you a report And what's fun is that person can read the report and all of a sudden they go, wow, yeah, that I couldn't even put into words why I felt that way. So they feel good about it.
Right.
And you feel good about it. And you can have the conversation and say, hey, so-and-so, I see on this assessment it says these are 10 tips on ways to communicate with you. Do these feel true? Oh, yeah. Okay, so help me out. Which two are like the two that you really want me to know?
Yep.
And that person can do that. And so we've already built some bridges and just enhance the communication. And that's the end of the day. That's the part that was the pain point back when Sarah was in treatment and when I was a manager and when I was a nurse instructor, like just communication, like clarify. Yeah. And this just makes it faster.
Yeah.
Saved my relationship with some of my close people in my life.
Yeah, for sure.
All of a sudden I understood them.
Right, yeah.
All of a sudden I understood myself. That was a whole nother story.
Correct, yeah. I mean, self-awareness is a huge portion of that whole thing, too,
100%,
right? And some people, I think, whether they're naturally more self-aware or they've just been through certain things in life that have, like, shone light on themselves, and then other people haven't or just aren't. And it's like if someone isn't self-aware of whatever it may be, it makes it that much harder to like point things out because they're like, are you attacking me?
Yeah.
Or should I be ashamed of that? Or how do
What's
I feel about that?
Yeah.
Because if that's how people are seeing me, but I don't even know what that means, like, what do I do with that?
Well, and there's a whole bunch of comments that are going through my head on that. Yeah. One, not everyone. There's a lot of people that are like self-aware. Oh, that feels kind of weird. And I like to draw out the nuance of self-aware versus self-absorbed. You know, like it's a whole different thing to be self-aware. Totally. Like to understand that sometimes I get a little loud, I get a little obnoxious, and so I have to be a little more dialed back, you know? Yeah. Okay, if I'm walking into a funeral, this might not be the time to be that goofy, silly person. I might need to dial myself down. Right. Or in B&I, when I was vice president, you know, I am not naturally the rule follower. I'm not naturally the person who colors and stays inside all the lines. Okay, but this is a role that requires that. Yeah. And so self-awareness goes, okay, this is why I'm exhausted at the end of that, because it takes so much energy to do that. And it just changes the dynamic. I'm aware of what's going on. I'm not playing a victim card, like I'm so exhausted, these people are so dramatic. No. The reason I'm exhausted is I know that this is not my natural. I don't just easily step into following the rules. Yeah.
And I want to get back to that point, but the whole self-aware versus self-absorbed thing makes me think that, like, someone that is self-absorbed, that's in a leadership position, is going to think, we're going to do this my way. Yeah. Versus someone that's self-aware is going to say, we're going to do this however it works for us.
Well, self-aware, we're going to be focused on, like when I work emotional intelligence and stuff like that, we talk about the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness, number 1. Other awareness, meaning I'm aware of how you show up. Number 2. Self-regulation, you know, like understanding I need to dial myself back. How do I bring myself into a place of regulation? Other regulation, which doesn't mean I'm regulating you, but just knowing how to interact in a way that's positive. But the one that's really key then, and bring that all together, is that place of what the assessment that I use anyway called motivation. But really what that is clarifying what's the outcome we're going after. So if you're a self-aware leader, and I'm growing in my self-awareness as your team member, but we have this piece that we're going, I do this because it's like the tip of the triangle, right? It's like we got 2 people here, and this is the tip of the triangle that we're going after. If we're both agreed, and we were working on your mission vision statements today, you know, if we're agreed on the vision, then you might do it over here, Alex might do it over here, but we're both driving towards the same goal.
Yep. And I guess that kind of circles back to, like, I've heard you talk about other situations that you've kind of worked through where you've been able to identify, like, hey, this person is in a good space for them because they, whether it fits their skill set or, like, they get energy from this or whatever, and vice versa. Yep. Like, you're like, oh, well, this is why you're exhausted. Yeah. And I always find, like, those examples are so... they're interesting because it's just another example of how everybody's different. Because you can hear someone else's job description and think, oh, that would be so cool. Like, I would totally jive there, and I'm going to walk in with energy, and I'm going to walk out with more because it's just such a good fit. And then you realize, like, oh, there are people that are going to be on the other side of the spectrum. And if I unintentionally put someone that's on the other side of the spectrum into that position, it's not going to go the way that my brain naturally thinks it's going to go.
Right.
And I think that's something that's helped us at the clinic when we talk about either communication styles or just understanding where we're going.
Yeah.
And in one of the examples I think that I brought up on here is knowing that, like, my directness is low.
Yep.
And that's something that we learned from the very first assessment.
Yep.
And it pops up probably every month that we have a meeting.
I think we talk about it. We tease you a little bit about it.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form. But because we're able to point that out, I'm able to step into that uncomfort zone of being more direct.
Yeah.
And Alex knows that, one, I'm outside of my comfort zone. Two, it might not come out pretty because I'm not in
I'm trying hard. I'm having to, like...
Yeah. It takes, like, double the energy to take this action in this way. But when you can step out of your comfort zone and do it and then get reinforced or affirmed.
Hey, thank you. Yeah.
Right? And Alex multiple times has said, like, hey, you were direct there. Very good job.
Yeah.
And as silly as that sounds, it's like, awesome.
Thank you.
I can do that.
Well, because every one of us wants to be seen. Do you see what I'm trying to do? Because it's like we're quick to judge based on what we see, but we don't know the intent behind that person. And knowing sometimes, like, if it's taking extra energy, it might come out a little sideways. I love that one of my kids helped me see this years ago. You know, like, I was having to, remember, I picked on myself, and I will pick on myself till the end of the day about I'm not naturally good at staying inside the lines. I have friends who send me pictures of cars sitting over. Chris Willard, if you're listening to this, yes, you have sent enough pictures of people parked over the center of the line. I'm really intentional about parking between the lines. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so if you see a car out there that's not in between the lines, I am self-aware enough that I do park between the lines. That being said,
I'm not going to make any comments because I know some people that I could totally call out right now, and out of respect, I'm not going to.
You're not going to say their name.
But you know who you are, so I'm just going to
just leave it right there.
Yeah.
But what I love is recognizing that it takes me energy to do that. And I was in a conversation with one of our kids one time, and they're like, are you upset with me? Because you sound really upset. I was like, whew. No, you know what? I'm really glad you pointed that out, because what I realized is I was, like, so much, like, pulling all my strength to hold this person accountable for something, and it was so challenging for me to do it, and I didn't have the fullness of the awareness at that point of that was as hard as it was for me, that I sounded angry. And I was like, oh, so I've learned in conversations with people sometimes now, when I have to be that intense, direct accountability person, hey, you know what? This is not my easiest place, Dr. Luke, and so I'm just going to remind you, hey, your dues for whatever are due now, you know, or something like that. Or, you know, I'm not saying that's what you are, but
no,
like
we're all paid up.
We're all paid up, that's good. And just recognizing, like, that could sound, because my emotional tension in my body doing something that's not my norm or my easy level, people can feel it, right? You and I can feel people's atmospheres. We can feel emotional stuff going on. And sometimes we make up stories. We think you're mad at me because I can feel you're tense, and so I interpret it as you're mad at me, when actuality you're just trying to get the energy to have the conversation, to be direct. And it's coming out a little sideways. And so if we have the self-awareness, like, hey, this is not my natural, and I can just call it out, and not, I can be self-deprecating or not, you know, I don't have to, you know, and be okay with it. One of the things I like to do is and I think we probably did this with you, I don't know if we did or not, maybe not, put your hands out and look at your fingerprints. Are they good or bad?
They just are.
They just are.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, we have these weird stories about who we are, and, like, I'm a low urgency person. You could have all kinds of weird mental trash going on about that, or you could turn and embrace it and say it's my superpower. I'm not quick to make decisions, so that makes me reflective and really good at listening to my patients. I'm thankful for doctors like that. You know, like how many people get upset because they're in and out of doctors' offices and there's a model there that's not doing. But depending on what the story is, we might be looking at our fingerprints and saying, ew, those are really icky. I've had a lot of people when I sit down and do their debriefs, they're like, okay, those are my fingerprints. Okay, yeah. I've been told I'm like that all the time, and I don't have a, you know, they might not put this exact verbiage, but they'll say, yeah, my mom used to say that was my worst trait.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, what if we could reframe that? And that's truthfully, like, this is my healthcare background, because if I can get you in a place of, like, embracing who you are and actually appreciating who you are, because I think it goes from self-awareness to self-appreciation. And when I can appreciate, this is how I show up, and I can bring my gift to the table, but I don't have to be the focal point of attention. I'm the puzzle piece that's there to help complete the puzzle. That's a really healthy place.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Which is totally different than self-absorbed, right? Because I think self-absorbed actually is a lack of confidence more and more.
Sure. Yeah. Or a projection of whatever.
No.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because when I talk with patients about stuff, it's so common to hear them say, well, you know, this doctor told me this. And I'll be like, okay, when was that? They'd be like, 1992.
And they're still carrying that story.
And so it's to think like, oh my gosh, for 30-some years, like, that's the story that this patient has had about this thing. And maybe it's right sometimes. Often it's not.
I was going to say, when we're stuck, there's usually a lie involved somewhere.
Yeah. And so it's just so interesting to kind of dig into that with some people. And I took a really cool mentorship course, not this summer, but last summer, with some other clinicians. And part of what we talked about was not just like meeting a patient where they're at, but then how do you like strategically re-educate them through their story, and understand that like not every story needs to be rewritten completely, because if a patient comes in and says, hey, Dr. So-and-so told me this, blah, 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 and our first thought is, that's wrong, right? Like, we're probably going to lose our chance to help them rewrite this. And so it was about just being strategic about that. And that's been so helpful, because
it sounds like a really good class.
Yeah, it was super cool.
That'll be another conversation. We'll finish that conversation over here. Which is really coaching, right? It's really coaching, which is what you do at MSU as well.
Right.
You know, it's like, how do we coach our patients?
Yeah. And that even ties into, like, what did we talk about today when we were going through our mission statement?
Yeah.
Right? Like, we got to the word of being a guide, or being, which we switched to, like, a resource. Yeah. But it's like, that's because that's where that coaching style fits in. Yeah. Not every patient wants to come in and be coached to feel better. That tone doesn't fit for everybody. But that's essentially what we're doing. Yeah.
It's really, if I could have a heartbeat passion that I could go, is like, we've talked about this, the drama triangle and rescuers and the healthcare model of rescuing people and fixing it for them. I have joked, and seriously, like, I'm the recovering rescuer, you know? And recognizing, like, even though they taught us in nursing school, like, no, your patient, your client has a desire, they have an outcome they want. Have you taken the time to ask questions, clarify, get in there and do? Or have you just assumed this is what they want and you're just going to go in and do it?
Right.
But if I could wave my magical wand and, like, do something for healthcare, I would love to transform the culture of healthcare from rescue to coach. Yeah. Like, how do we see ourselves as healthcare providers, as coaches? Right. And coming alongside and helping you live your best life, helping you, what is your outcome? You know, when I was working in the hospital, we had patients that truthfully didn't want to get well. They just, their outcome was like, you know, take care of my constipation, my plugged up colon, and send me home on my way. I don't really care.
Yeah. Good enough. I'll be back in a month.
Yeah, I'll be back. And that's truthfully what they wanted. And not to judge that as good or bad, but to come to a place of, how do we move to a coaching model in healthcare? And even as a business owner, how do you coach your employees to come up that boss mindset, manager mindset versus a coaching mindset of, we want to help draw out a really good coach draws out the best. You know, what are we today? Tuesday, Sunday night, when we're recording this, we had our daughter's volleyball banquet on Sunday night. And we have a phenomenal volleyball team that our daughter's gotten to be a part of, very high profile. If I said the school, you'd all know it, and has done well, state level. And what I love is watching the coaching mindset at a really young age. That's really instilled in their program, and it's brought up. And that's why they've done well, I think, is like help draw out the kids that want to come up, find out what they want.
Yeah, that makes me think of my buddy Jordan, who works at Bank Vista, 2 blocks away, and he's kind of in a manager role there where he wears a whole bunch of different hats. And when you go into the bank there, you go in and there's a couple people that have kind of their desk areas like right up front when you greet people, and that's where his desk is. And part of that is because he is one of those like obnoxiously sunshiny people that like he's the face that you want to see when you walk in there.
It's a good spot for him.
It's a good spot for him. But when we talked about it a little bit more, he mentioned that he also pushed to have his desk there because part of his job is managing the tellers and all the other people that are doing more of like the day-to-day tasks and whatnot. And he said that it was hard for him to coach if he's not on the court with them.
That's really
from
cool.
his sport background, right? And he's like, when I get to be here and I'm in the middle of it, I get to be a better coach. I get to be just more involved, have a better awareness of what's going on versus hiding in a back office and saying like, yep, I'm the authoritative figure here. I'm going to come out when I need to assert my authority, and then I'm going to go back. And I just always thought that. And like that's him talking through that story or that perspective, like partially encourages me to get out of my office sometimes. Because my office just isn't set up where I can be out on the front court all the time, right? I'm stuck in the back. But I try and make it a point to come up front and check in and be present and like be more active with that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you catch you said on the court? Just
I
did. Just because you guys don't know this, but it was part of our conversation an hour ago. So that kind of caught my attention.
Alex's word too, so it was good.
That's good.
Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
Any other current thought on your head before I think of the next one?
Current thought on my head, that could be dangerous.
That's very dangerous.
It's a very dangerous place. Yeah.
Because the other thing that I was thinking of doing, since we've been working on our mission statement, vision statement, all that stuff, is to read what we got.
Totally up to you if you want to lay it out there. Totally.
Yeah,
have fun on it. Yeah. And talk about how we've gotten here probably would be kind of a fun play, if you will, because
correct.
One of the organizations I've been working with, one of the team doctors in that facility is just like, really, a mission vision statement? Like, he's like, aren't they all the same? Why do I need to spend the energy on this?
Right.
And, it was good because he's like, you and I have had this conversation. Like, I was a person, you've said you're kind of that person where in my younger years, I didn't want to set goals because, like, for a variety of reasons, either I'm not going to make them or they just irritate me or I'm going to do that.
Right.
Like it was kind of this weird angst of going through that. And so when this doctor was saying like, hey, Kris, I don't even understand why we have to have a mission vision statement. Isn't that the same standard? And what's been fun is we've been incorporating the assessment called Find Your Why, which has been really kind of cool. It's been fun watching people do their why assessments. So, if people want to at the end, if they want to find their why, they can reach out. We could talk about that.
Yeah.
But what we've done for you is taken your why and your what and your how based on this assessment, taken Alex's, and then ChatGPT is a great tool.
Yep.
Let's create, I think I put the terms like captivating, engaging, and inspiring and motivating mission vision statement based on these characteristics. And then I threw it by you guys today. And I loved watching your response to it today because I purposely did not give it to you until I got in the office today because I wanted to be able to watch your eyes, like, because the eyes tell the story, And you read it through the first time and you're like, I kind of like this. And it was almost like you were opening a Christmas present that you kind of liked.
For sure.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I think what part of why I might have like pushed back on that stuff in the past is it's probably like athletic based, but it's like I remember at the beginning of the year, so many of the teams that I was on would be like, okay, what's our goals?
Yeah.
Right? And you kind of talk through it, and then you throw some ideas on the table, and you mix it up a little bit, and then you write it on a paper, and then like, there it
Voila.
is. Right? And it always felt a little more surface level, and I've always just been more of a process focused person than an outcome focused person.
There you go.
And so that shift in the perspective made it extra hard for me
Yeah.
because I just had the idea that, well, if I just keep working hard on the right things, then the goals are gonna like achieve themselves basically. But
which is typical of a high selfless, high harmonious, by the way, which is your driving forces.
yeah, exactly.
If I just work harder, if I just work longer hours.
Right. And so that just gets more complicated though when there's more people.
It does.
And I think that's the like superpower of those goals is in the clarifying.
Yeah.
Kind of like you did that before. And so I think why this feels so good is that we've worked through a lot of the other stuff. Like we've done the assessments, we've identified certain roles and patterns and pain points, where we've like really dug through a lot of layers and got to the point where it's like, okay, now what is the unifying thing?
That's cool. Yep.
Yeah. And it just times out well. And the fact that like, because I wouldn't say avoided it, but it's like I've always had the vague mission statement and the vague vision thing. So now that we're at the point where it's like, hey, we can actually like write this out and feel the way that we want to feel about it.
And that's a key. That's a really big key, is how does it feel and resonate with you? Because if it doesn't feel right, you're going to be like, oh, it's not even,
Right.
We buy things based on how they feel. We buy on the why, you know. We like to think we're logical. Yeah. Where's all our cards dealers in the group, you know? Like, we buy based on that emotional feel. We logic it and whatever. Fun fact is your brain fires emotionally faster than your logic does. And so it's like, this is how we make decisions. We base it on emotion, and then we come back and justify it. So now we've tied this to your why, which is an emotional gut thing.
Right.
And even as we played with it today, we even nuanced it a little further into an emotional thing. So now it's like, oh, this feels good. And the what of it is really cool too. So
yeah. So for the first time reading these new vision statements publicly, so now that means it's a real thing. But we started with our...
Who says you don't have a sense of risk and urgency? Look at you go.
I can do it. I can be opportunistic with that.
There you go.
But we started with our vision statement, which is like 10,000 foot top down type of thing. And what we came up with so far, us plus assessments plus technology and all this stuff.
Some team players behind the scenes as well.
Yeah. And we've had 10 plus meetings.
Yeah.
You know, we've
spent some fair amount of time.
10 plus hours on this, plus our homework, which we appreciate.
Yeah.
But here's our Kinetic Spine and Sport vision statement, work in progress.
This is vulnerable.
Oh,
Not really. It's fun.
It's
fun.
cool. Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah.
Well, and I'll say this too. Like, I'm a very high logic person.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's another theme that's come up in all of our stuff. And that's also been a theme in my life. I've had plenty of people make different comments on that. And I think sometimes when you're a logic person, people make it seem like you don't have feelings. Right?
Which is
not true.
Not true.
Yeah. And I've kind of wrestled with, like, well, am I a logic person because I'm protecting my feelings, or am I a logic person because I need to think through it to make sure that my feelings make sense?
Or are we getting way too granular and it's like, just, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, I think this just fits really well, because we've worked it through both ways.
Yeah, that's awesome. Please share.
Vision statement. Because life is a sport, we desire to create a community where individuals and families thrive through holistic care, empowering them to embrace a life of health, balance, and purpose. We aim to be a trusted resource in guiding every patient towards clarity, confidence, and resilient wellness.
I love that.
Period.
What are some of the words that stuck out for you today when we did that?
I knew you were going to do that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, I love it. So, of the first sentence, like, purpose was the big one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we always want to be, like, purpose-driven. And then the other one is probably community, because we just talk about, like, that's what we're all a part of. Whether it's the business community, the patient community, the Mankato community. Like, we're all in this fluid thing together. And then empowering. And even though that's one that really gets, I think, overused in a lot of situations, it still ends up being a focal point for us. Because that's our goal, is to give people this power to accomplish things and move forward.
Absolutely.
So that was, those are the big ones for that.
Yep.
And then mission statement, we had, and mission statement is more of like the day-to-day process of things, right?
It's the nuance of how
the nuance, how do we do these things?
How do we bring that vision to life is kind of the way.
Sure. Yeah. The application of the vision statement.
There you go.
So, at Kinetic Spine and Sport, we are committed to providing expert, personalized chiropractic care. We help make sense of our patients' challenges, provide innovative solutions, and contribute meaningfully to their well-being. Because life is a sport, we create a supportive environment where every individual feels heard, valued, and empowered to play. And then we weren't quite sure how we were going to end it.
Yep. And we were even messing around with the empowered word if we wanted to switch that to ready to play.
Right. So.
Yeah.
But it's just so cool working through that and being able to do it with a way. If we would have done this last fall.
Yeah. Well, and you were the pain point, and this is when go back to the beginning of this conversation. Which pain point is the pain point that we need to address first?
Yeah.
And even the human body, you know, you could have a bunch of different things going on at the same time, but your body actually prioritizes what needs to be taken care of first. Even when you're putting the back in alignment, you know, like if we can get the back in alignment first, then we can do some of the other issues, right? What is that first priority for that business owner that I'm working with? Right. This was not the priority. If to be talking about mission vision when you got a staffing problem going on, it's like, really, Kris, this is paper over here. This is not my bread and butter right now. Right. I need to get the system to work. Yeah. And it's the tension. It's the tension, because sometimes we need to have that mission vision so that we can align, because when we're, especially in today's hiring environment, a lot of people are saying, hey, what's your bigger picture? What's your goal? And there are people choosing employers based on stuff like this. So there is a tension towards this needs to be there. Right. And I need to get somebody in the position that can do the role and do the thing. So which pain point are we going to go after first? Right. And so that was the pain point for the fall. And then we've moved to here we are doing this. Yeah. And use it as like a tool. Yeah. Right. To like, by building up to this, it's made our team better. Yeah. It's made a lot of the different moving pieces better. Which I think also speaks to just like you want a long ongoing relationship with a client, you know. I don't see, you know, I want to help you, I want to equip you, but I also want you to be able to check in like once a month and do a maintenance visit or something like that potentially, you know, like if need be. But it's also that place of working with a coach for your business. You know, years ago I had a business coach say to me, before I had ever hired a business coach or any kind of coach actually at that point, she's like, so you're a coach, huh? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, where's your coach? And I was like, and I think I've told you this statement. She's like, where's your coach? And I'm like, those are my toes you're stepping on. Thank you very much. Yeah. And you are totally right. Yeah. You know, like called out and called up. But that beauty of working with a coach to kind of keep things moving forward, keep you growing, keep you moving in that place. And at the risk of totally sounding self-grandiosing, but it makes a difference. And to have somebody just like, you know, okay. And we check in like once a month. you know, plus the homework and stuff like that. But that it's just been that place of steady check-in. Where are we going?
Right. And if I'm thinking back through things, like, you're technically the fourth coach I've worked with.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. In various clinics and in positions. So, you know, I think for some people, it's a way, like, outside idea where, you know, I'm sure there's plenty of people that run businesses and never work with anybody else on the outside.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily mean that they're less successful, right? Like, that just might be how it is.
Yep.
But for some people, like, they might not have even thought of it, and it might be a super good thing for them.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough to work in other places that were big on coaching.
Yeah.
Where I got to just experience that dynamic, see where the value is created.
Yep.
And when I got here, like, it's always been on my radar.
Yeah.
I just needed the right opportunity for it.
Yeah. And that sometimes you outgrow coaches.
Yeah.
You know, because you've had 4 coaches. I've had probably 4 or 5 coaches as well, where it's like, okay, this coach helped me get from here to here.
Right.
Okay. What's the next step?
Yeah.
What's the next piece? You know, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay with one person forever and ever. This is not that you're in cement. Now you have to work with this one. You know, some of my initial coaching programs with people, I usually start with more of a taste and see, like, let's do a 30, 60, or 90 day thing. Let's just see if we're a good match. That way you don't feel icky or weird. I don't feel icky or weird because you and I have loved working together because we're both like, bring this stuff on. We're like, okay, when's the next book? What's this one? You know, like last night I texted him. I'm like, hey, I got another tool I want you to check out, you know, just for...
Yeah.
And so it's that fun because there's an alignment and there's a synergy there. And so, you know, that makes it just pleasurable. It's not work. It's me being in the right seat in my bus.
Sure.
Helping your seat on the bus as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's there's magic when, like, either way, I'm going to work to make the business better.
Exactly.
I'm going to keep working to hopefully be a better leader and manager, better chiropractor, better whatever, a better me.
Well, that's going to make you better in all areas of life, right? Because you can't just touch one spot without...
Correct. How you do anything is how you do everything.
I think we said that.
We did, yeah.
We'll say it again.
Right. But it's like when you can work with the right people, it feels like it infuses that work process with, like, more fun, more joy, more something.
Yeah.
And it's like that extra fuel that makes you want to dig a little deeper.
Right.
You know, work a little harder, be a little more vulnerable, like whatever that more thing is.
Yeah.
And to me, like, that's it. Like, that's where some of the magic happens is you find the right person for the right phase, for the right thing that you're working on.
And that's the key, right? Because if I've had friends who are friends, they become friends as their clients. They tell me when they first started working with me, they're like, oh my gosh, you're so different than other people. And it's like, well, good. You had to find the right person.
Yeah.
And there may come a point when I'm no longer that right person. And not because I don't care for you, but I might say, you know what? That's beyond my skill set. Let's take you and get you. And I've introduced some of my clients to other coaches because I'm like, hey, this is the person you need for this hour.
Yep.
Or, you know, some of my organizations I bring in, I've got an HR strategist coach for the bigger organizations, we do strategic coaching together. So like if you know, say you've got 20 staff, this is one company I've got right now where she comes alongside me. She's my HR person because that's not my wheelhouse. I don't know the rules. Did I mention I don't like the rules and regs? Okay, I think I mentioned that.
Yeah.
But, you know, Diane's great in coming alongside me. And she's like, hey, Kris, they need to be thinking about this. There's a new state law on this. Great.
Yeah, good to know.
Good to know. Yeah, good to know.
Yeah, cool.
What do you wish you had known before you started any kind of coaching? Like, what would you say?
Ooh, with you specifically?
Just any coaching in general. What would you say to any business owner that's thinking about coaching? Or individual that's thinking about coaching?
Yeah. What do I wish I knew beforehand? I can say with the 4 people that I've worked with, I went in expecting to just get something out of it, and each time I've gotten more out of it than I expected.
Okay.
And I think that's an important pattern, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that, like, you kind of make it what you make it. So I guess I'll take some credit for trying to get stuff out of things, right?
Yeah.
But I also think the big step is like getting through that like fear obstacle of like, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? Is this worth the cost? Is it whatever? Yeah. Like, you almost just have to be open to letting it be worth it.
Okay.
And then kind of going to work on it. But also understanding like who says it has to work, or that like you have to follow through with it. Mm-hmm. So like you talk about doing those shorter trials, that's what that's there for, because we also have to accept the fact that not everybody's a match for us.
Exactly.
And part of the skill of it is recognizing that. Yep. And you also have to trust that like if this person doesn't think I'm a good match or vice versa, that's also their job.
That's part of that direct conversation that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so understanding that even finding the right match can be a work in progress. But when you find it, like, there's a whole bunch of value that you can find that either you knew was there but didn't know how to get to it, or you just didn't even know it was there.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is the biggest misconception that business owners have about a leadership coach or a coach?
Ooh, I think it's the fear of somebody coming in and saying, you need to change all this. I think part of why some of us owners or leadership people, part of why we get into those roles is we don't want people telling us what to do, right? And so I think that's probably a big fear, where they think, well, someone's going to come in here with a magnifying glass and recognize all these things that are wrong and make you change it. And then like change by itself is difficult. Yeah. So I bet that's probably the biggest hesitation, because that's like the human nature factor.
Oh, nobody likes to be told what's wrong with them. I mean, like, nobody.
Yeah, even
if we want to grow.
Yeah, even if you know it's going to be better afterwards.
Yeah. Right? Darren.
Yeah.
Don't stub my toes.
Yeah. So I think that's probably like the number one thing. But, you know, I've had some like little feedback or worked with a coach, and it might be the smallest comment that they make that then makes the biggest impact. Mm-hmm. Impact. Oh. See what I did there? Oh. Yeah.
Impact zone strategies. What's limiting your impact? That was good.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. But it's like you also have to go into it with like openness to being able to like catch those moments. Yeah. Because, you know, I'm sure we've had some meetings with you where that day I'm a little more stressed, or I'm a little more scatterbrained, or like whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And I always remind myself, like, this time has a purpose. I need to rein that in as much as I can. Yeah. Because you can, I can't think of the right phrase for it, but like you can zombie walk through a meeting. Yeah,
totally.
Just to say I checked the box, right? Mm-hmm. And so if it's a good protected time, you're probably going to get more out of it than if it's just like, oh yeah, we signed up for this coaching thing because she said she's going to make us better or whatever. Yeah. It's not guaranteed, because
you have to do this stuff.
It's an active thing.
Yeah.
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 And I think probably one of the other misconceptions is that you're going to come in with, or a coach is going to come in with like a rigid process of how to do things. Yeah. And my guess is a lot of the good coaches out there that are in your group are going to be able to recognize, okay, this is what is going to fit this situation, or what's going to fit this client, without totally rocking the boat, because that's probably not the goal.
Well, and there are some people that like rigid programs.
Sure.
There are people that are like, I want you to tell me exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it, what to breathe, how to breathe. You know, they want all of that. That's not this coach.
Right.
That's not. Yeah. And so I'm not going to be, if that's the client coming in, we're not going to be a good match.
Right.
I'm going to be more of that sounding board and say, oh, okay, so tell me more about that. You know, that's what we did with your statement today. It was like, okay, so what is it about this word? Here's some other words. What do you think about these words? You know, playing with it.
Yep. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, Oh, yep. It is 2:00.
I can't imagine that we went a little longer than you expected.
Us? No.
No.
Of course not. I think we're still under an hour technically.
There we
so
go.
That's great. Thank you, Kris, for joining the podcast. And
Thank you.
For everything that you've done for our team.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's been beyond awesome. And I'm excited to who knows where it goes, right? Who knows where each of us go.
Well,
but it's always cool to be able to say that thing was a good thing for us.
Yep.
And I feel so good about that.
Well, and the goal for me is always to leave people better than I found them, and so thank you. I appreciate it. And it's been fun working with you. And then knowing the ripple that goes out, that means you have better customer experiences, which means they go into the community feeling better, which leads to the bigger ripple. And so it's fun to be part of that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find you if they want to reach out? And we'll kind of end it with that.
So if they want to reach out and connect, you can find me on LinkedIn, just Kris Langworthy, Kris Langworthy, Lang, no S. I shouldn't even throw that in there when I say that like that, because now people go, what? We'll start that all over again, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Kris, Kris Langworthy, Langworthy on LinkedIn, or else impactzonestrategies.com. And if you go on impactzonestrategies.com, there is a place there for a complimentary 30-minute consultation. Go ahead and sign up for that. I love watching people's names come across and connecting there, or send me a DM on LinkedIn. So
cool.
Mention this podcast and let me know that you watch this, and you'll get a percentage off Find Your Why assessment. So just let me know about that so that they can do that. It would be kind of fun. It's been kind of fun.
Super fun.
For the man who makes sense, that would be his why, making sense of things. Me challenging. So, my why is I like to challenge you to think outside the box for your solutions. Hey, that would make a great coach. What do you think?
There you go. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thanks for tuning in to episode 10, and we'll see you for
10.
11.
All right. Yeah. Thanks.